Sydney's entertainment scene was once dominated by mega clubs and large pubs. This was due to expensive and complex liquor licensing laws. If you hoped for some kind of intimacy, forget. However, the Liquor Licensing Amendment of 2007 completely changed that. The changes came about in part because Sydney wanted to follow in the footsteps of other Australian cities, in particular its rival Melbourne, who was already quite famous for its atmospheric lanes dotted with quirky and ambitious bars. The amendment provided affordable licenses to small bars that served alcohol as their primary activity and permitted a maximum of 120 patrons. And with that, the Sydney's small bar boom began. Places began springing up along back streets, service alleys, and slip roads across the CBD and surrounding suburbs. Nowadays, if you're on a small bar in Sydney, there's a good chance you're standing in a basement or on a second floor, and that you had a hard time finding it, having wended uncertainly down a side street or sketchy stairwell to a door that may or may not have been marked. In fact, Sydney has more than caught up to Melbourne with about twice as many small bars. And Jason Crawley, an English bartender, consultant, and entrepreneur in Australia since 2000, once stated, Sydney has completely blasted it out of the water. But many Melburnians would disagree. And today we will explore the small bar scene in both cities. Did Sydney just go overboard with FOMO, giving their rivals rich history? Is Melbourne becoming complacent? Or are the small bar scenes in both cities just too unique and deserve individual attention? It is time to find out. Hello, everyone, and welcome to I'm Free Walking Tours, a culture podcast. Today is the second in a series aimed at exploring culture along the east coast of Australia. My name is Adrian, and I'm joined by my co-host Lenny from Melbourne and Jake, one of our wonderful Sydney guides. How are you both going today?
Very good. How you going, Adrian?
I'm very well. As you can probably imagine, life is getting a little bit better with the restrictions getting slowly undone. So hopefully we'll be actually able to go to these small bar places very shortly, as we'll find out later.
Yes, that's very exciting. And I'm very excited to be here, to be alive, to be able to drink occasionally.
Well, you've been able to drink occasionally at home, that's true, but let's actually go out. And I guess that's the focus of today's little podcast that we're going here. So I gave a little bit of introduction about the small bar scene and its history in Sydney. Lenny, as our representative from Melbourne, and so, who believes he knows a couple of things about the small bar scene there, as we'll find out later. What's the history behind Melbourne's drinking culture lifestyle?
Oh, we've been drinking in Melbourne to excess since we were founded. The funny thing was we were actually founded by a teetotaler. Ever heard of the word teetotaler?
No, I have not. Let me know.
Someone that does not drink a drop of alcohol, abstains from alcohol. John Pascoe Faulkner, our founder of Melbourne, arriving on the 30th of August, 1835 to the Port Phillip districts. The reason he was so famous for alcohol was because he understood the value of alcohol, and he set up the very first pub in Melbourne, which made him very popular. Everyone loved him because, of course, he set up the very first pub. He was the one importing alcohol from Tasmania, getting it over here to Melbourne and getting everyone very nicely drunk. But we've been literally drinking in Melbourne for as long as we humanly possibly could. And the history is very bizarre because it goes up and down based on how the government reacts. We import loads of alcohol and the government goes, whoa, this is not good, and puts on huge restrictions. And then wait a couple of years, and then the government goes, oh, well, we'll loosen things up again. And then everyone starts drinking in, and they go, whoa, rein back down on it again. So we've just spent this entire history of drinking too much, not drinking at all, drinking too much, not drinking at all. And finally, at this point in our history, we are well and truly in the drinking too much category.
Right.
Just a matter of time before history repeats itself. Exactly what's going to happen. I'm waiting for the drop to happen.
I have a feeling that once we are allowed to go out again, we will continue, at least in Melbourne, as you say, Letty, that drinking too much. I mean, on that sort of topic, and as you said about those laws having effects, I guess, we should definitely have a little bit of a chat, and I'll get your perspective on it, Jake, as from Sydney, about those lockout laws that have been kind of a little bit of a thorn in the side of Sydney's history. I mean, today there's many places that you can go out at night. The places that you can go to have kind of changed, and that's because of those lockout laws that came into effect in February 2014. So the whole point of them, as we know, was to reduce alcohol fuel violence, but it had that unfortunate consequence of closing down a lot of the larger clubs, the larger bars, particularly in King's Cross. Some very famous casualties like World Bar and Hugo's. I have some very fond memories of both of those places. They were actually lifted in January this year. Kind of got sort of forgotten amongst all the bushfire crisis and amongst all the COVID issue, which completely understandable. It's not as anywhere near a big issue as that. But in regards to an ongoing controversy within Sydney, I'm wondering how Sydney will revive its nightlife once a little bit of normality is resumed. I guess I want to hear what your thoughts about this topic, how you saw the nightlife change as the lockout laws came into effect, and what influence do you think will have if they start getting rolled back as they did?
I never personally was a big part of Sydney's like nightlife and clubbing scene. So in terms of how I've seen the changes, I hear about the changes. I've always been more on the small bar, nice cocktail kind of scene, which I think kind of was boosted, as you said, and thriving because of this kind of shift in the culture. But of course, I mean, yeah, like you said, the King's Cross area took a huge blow. It's changed and will probably never be as it was before. But I also think that it's moved. It's changed and adapted. It's moved to outer suburbs. I don't think that we'll ever lose nightlife and clubbing culture. People will always fight for their right to partay. But it's adapted and changed.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, small bars are mainly an inner city phenomenon in Sydney, but as you said, they have spread out into the neighbourhoods. Paddington, Glebe, Newtown absolutely boomed once the lockout laws came into effect, as they were just on the outskirts of it. I guess from your perspective, Lenny, down in Melbourne, if one was wanting to explore small bars outside the CBD, where would you be going yourself or recommending people to go to?
There are so many places to go to get alcohol in Melbourne. Do you know, if you were to guess, how many alcoholic venues do you think there are in Melbourne? Places that you can sit down and grab a drink.
I'm going to go.
So this would include restaurants with that have liquor licenses that you can sit down and drink.
Now the number's going to get astronomical. I'm going to go 8,000.
8,000? Jake?
How many people in Melbourne?
A bit more than 5 million these days.
I'm going to go 150,000. I'm very bad at math.
150,000, that would be a lot. We have 14,423 alcoholic venues. This was recorded at the end of 2018. So 14,423, that's one alcoholic venue for every 332 people.
That's
which is not
plenty
bad.
to go around.
I'm going to assume that ratio is a little bit better, because out of those 322 people, I'm going to assume maybe 10, 15 or so are below the age of 18. So they won't be able to drink alcohol anyway. So I'm sure that ratio goes up. But it's a pretty healthy ratio in our history. We've had moments like in 1840, so 5 years after we founded, we had 50 pubs in Melbourne, which 50 pubs doesn't seem like a lot, but we had a very small population 5 years after being settled. So that was one pub for every 240 people. So that was a time where we were doing even better. But probably the most drunk we've ever been in our history would have to be in 1910. That's just before a huge amount of restrictions got put in place, but we had one pub for every 120 people. So
Wow.
1910 was the height of our drunkenness.
That's the 150,000 number there.
So
Yeah. And so if you do want to drink in Melbourne outside of the city centre, it's literally everywhere. Chapel Street is one of my big haunting grounds, going to Richmond and Swan Street, going north to High Street, Brunswick Street, Smith Street, going to Fitzroy, Collingwood, literally anywhere. I specialise definitely in the centre of the city. I'm looking at my map at the moment that I've got. This is a map that I've kind of designed for myself to find places here in Melbourne, because I get asked all the time, you know, where's the best place to go? I'm on this corner and this corner, tell me where to go. Okay. So I got to look up my map. I've listed 94 bars that I have drunk at in the centre of the city. So the centre of the city is a 1 mile by half a mile square. So it's a small area.
So you've
only got my favourite.
14,328 to go, if my maths is working correctly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much. I mean,
so I'm doing well.
When I've been down in Melbourne, I've definitely visited those places like Brunswick Street, Chapel Street, Richmond. Those small bars seem to be clustered, I guess, along like a street or a boulevard. In Sydney, the small bars are often clumped together, but they're not really as kind of obvious straight off the street. You kind of have to go around and look down alleyways or go up 6 flights of stairs. One street that pops out to me most is Clarence Street, but there's many other places in Sydney. I can see that, you know, Jake's looking pretty happy about Clarence Street. I guess if a tourist is coming to Sydney and they want to experience something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, but still quite enjoyable, what's this small bar crawl that you're recommending to them, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of very good crawls in Sydney. I do want to honorable mention even the Rocks and Circular Quay, which is the most touristy part of the city. But even in there are these beautiful, excellent hidden spots. You mentioned Newtown earlier as well. Right along King Street, Enmore Road, there are some fantastic small bar crawl options. Also Surrey Hills. But yes, you do know that my favorite is what I've called the Clarence Street crawl. And there are a good number of bars along there. You can start in any order, but there's the barbershop, beautiful behind a barbershop cocktail bar. Next to it, the Duke of Clarence, this lovely London tavern. Across from that, the Baxter Inn, underground whiskey bar. Across the road, Old Mate's Place, hidden in an office building, up 4 flights of stairs. Rooftop,
there is a lift.
Bar.
I say there is a lift.
There is a lift.
When you say hidden, what does that like?
You walk along Clarence Street, you come to a suit shop. And to the right of that is just this alleyway that has a couple of bins in it. You go down that alleyway and then suddenly you're in this kind of square. And that's where the barbershop, Duke of Clarence, is. And then in that square, there's a fire escape. And you go down the fire escape and then you're in the Baxter Inn.
That's pretty impressive.
And may I say, with the Baxter's Inn, there'll usually be a couple of barrels of alcohol lining that fire escape stairs, which I kind of find ironic, given that it should be, very much a fire escape. There's always the odd musky smell as well. But once you open the door, you open into a completely different world. There's 40s, 50s swings music blasting. There's a great sort of ambience. There's a nice sort of vibe to the place. And I know both you, Jake, and Lenny have been to and from Melbourne many times in your life. We do frequent each other's cities. I guess kind of reverse the perspective. What do you notice most about the other cities' drinking atmosphere when you go down to each place?
Whenever I go up to, this is why I'm here listening to you guys. I never drink in Sydney. I mean, the only time that I can think of that I drank in Sydney was my brother had his Bucks party, and the Bucks party. We were going down a street, and the thing that I remember was that everyone was complaining about how that we would try to get into a place at midnight. And the bouncers at the front would be like, well, I mean, you can come in, but we're going to be open for another 30 minutes. So it's not worth it. We're about to close. We're going to kick everyone out anyway. And I'm sitting there going, What do you mean we're going to kick everyone out? What do you mean it's midnight? Why can't we stay up until 5 a.m.? I don't understand. So that was my one experience of trying to go through Sydney to go to bars. I was letting everyone else lead me from place to place. We did find a really amazing Mexican bar, which I just drank tequila all night, which was great.
El Loco?
Could not give you the name of it for the life of me. I was very much lost in Sydney. But the majority of the drinking that we did was in a restaurant, in a place that we could sit for a long time, that we knew we wouldn't get kicked out, that we knew that we could keep eating. So my view of Sydney drinking was that it just didn't go as late as Melbourne.
Yeah, I think that's like a definitely a fair call. I think we drink earlier just in general. I don't know if that's just in Sydney, but I remember like being in Melbourne and like being in a small bar thinking, oh, it must be closing sometime soon. And it did not close, which was fantastic.
Melbourne definitely goes in waves. If it's a more fancy cocktail lounge, you're looking at closing at 1 a.m. If it's a place that is a little bit more grungy, probably looking around 3 a.m. And then if it's got live music, you're looking at 5 a.m. And then if it's a special place like Lock and Key, you're looking at about 7 a.m. There are a couple of venues in Melbourne in the centre of the city that have a 24 liquor license venue. They have a liquor license for 24 hours. They don't use it. There's only one place that I know of that is wild enough to try and use that, and that is a place called Revs.
Wow.
So we're usually pretty good when it comes to opening up late. I think we actually did try the lockout laws in Melbourne. Did you guys know that?
I did not.
Yeah, we tried it in 2009, and I remember this because that's when I graduated from high school, 2009. So it was about the time when I was going out to bars in the city, starting university, experiencing this type of stuff, and it was basically a trial period. They wanted to see whether it would work out. They wanted to see, places like Ballarat. Places like, was it Newcastle as well?
Yeah, they did it in Newcastle as well.
They did do it in Newcastle.
And so there was a huge amount of success with safety and reducing violence. I mean, Sydney most recently jumped up from, I think it's gone up to the 5th safest city in the world, according to Economist magazine, whereas Melbourne's dropped down to number 10. Yeah. I really think that is due to the lockout laws and making...
I think it's due to Revs.
might be due to Revs. Revs might be dragging us down a little bit. But we tried in, it was actually June 2008. We put in a 2 a.m. lockout law, which you'd think 2 a.m., that's not too bad. I mean...
we end up going with 1:30 a.m., but it's now been pushed back to 2 a.m.
So we had the 2 a.m. one, but the problem is there was no consultation with the industry. No one talked to anyone about it. They just introduced it. They were basing it off Newcastle and Ballarat, small towns in comparison to the population of Melbourne. And when they introduced it, it quickly fell apart. There were 120 different venues that were very quickly given exemptions from the rule, and then all the other small bars also started protesting and fighting against it. And then also they changed the laws to be a one-size-fits-all. Like you had to pay more money for a liquor license based on how late you stayed open, no matter how big or small you were. So it didn't depend on the size and the amount of patrons. So all these rules were not really regulated in the right way, and they disappeared within a couple of years. Do you know who were the number one complainants, the people who complained the most about these liquor license laws and said they had to be removed? Could you guess?
I'm going to go with a really odd demographic. Let's go the baby boomers.
No.
Baby boomers.
The baby boomers wanted to drink until 5 a.m. No, it was actually police officers.
Oh.
Say what?
Yeah, the police officers were complaining because instead of drunk people being inside bars, which hire private security, all the drunk people were then out on the street because they couldn't get back into the bar. The trial was some of the hardest and most difficult period of time for the police officers here in Melbourne because the amount of drunk people that they had to deal with was huge. And so those laws were repealed and we were able to get our city back.
Well, hopefully Sydney's laws get a little bit relaxed over time. They've made one amendment so far. Speaking about leaving the bar, I guess an important bit of information, if anyone is visiting Sydney or Melbourne, is what to do once the bar closes if you want to keep partying, or also just how you just get around at the city at night when everything closes. I mean, I often have tourists come to me and be like, how do I actually get back to my hotel? I especially struggled in Melbourne, may I say, compared to Sydney's, I guess, much more integrated public transport network. If you're actually, say, Lenny, you're in Richmond or you're down in Chapel Street or Brunswick Street and you need to get back to the CBD at 4 a.m. in the morning, what are your options?
Easy. Melbourne on a Friday night and a Saturday night is a 24-hour city. Our public transport, our trains run all Friday night, all Saturday night, which means that if you're at any point in Melbourne, we also have a lot of night rider buses as well to get to those more difficult places. But generally speaking, if you want to get into the city centre, to get back to your hostel, to get back to your hotel, it doesn't matter where you are in Melbourne, the trains will be running all night, and select trams will be running all night. So for me, I don't even look at the clock. I just keep going as long as I want, and then I get home when I want to. And of course, Uber is a very easy way to get home a little bit quicker. So Melbourne's never been a bit of an issue with that. We decided we wanted to be at the city to Melbourne to be as safe as possible, and getting people home safely makes Melbourne more safe in general. So having that public transport running 24 hours a day, 2 days a week at least.
And what do you find, Jake?
That's wild and fantastic, because our public transport, like trains and the regular scheduled buses, stop at like midnight, 1 a.m. So as someone who grew up 40 minutes out of the city, you'd always have to be like, well, this is the last drink. It's, 12:50 or whatever. I got to go walk and catch my bus. I moved closer to the city, and then there are the night bus kind of options, but they are very grim. I've often wanted to make like a short film about this, like being on one of those night buses. You've got like the people having the argument at the back, the people on the side being like, I love you so much. And then like everybody else just passed out. And I'm just like on this bus, it smells bad. But yeah, I mean, having bars close at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., the ones that I go to at least, of course, there usually is a train. Like I just catch the last train, I guess, or Uber. Yeah.
I think that's definitely a consideration when visiting Sydney, is that to be aware that the transport network is 24 hours, but it's a completely different network between 1 and say 5 a.m. in the morning. And there's nothing worse than rocking up at Central Station and seeing that your next train is in 4.5 hours. Yes. So it definitely needs a little bit more pre-planning in advance.
Have you guys ever heard of the Beer Licensing Act? I was curious about it because it was introduced in the 1830s, and I'm assuming that Sydney's drinking, or historically their drinking culture, has been very similar to Melbourne, because 1830s, this was before Melbourne was even founded, Sydney passed a law, and back then the whole east coast of Australia was the British colony of New South Wales, and they said that anyone within this colony of New South Wales, if you want to open up an alcoholic venue, you needed two things to have with your alcohol. One was food. You had to serve food with your drink at all times. And the other one was you needed to have beds. So a place for people to sleep for the night. Yeah. So do the pubs, the old-fashioned pubs in Sydney, are they called hotels?
Yeah. Yes, they certainly are. Yeah, a lot of people often look at the title and go, oh, why is there all these people drinking inside a hotel so visibly? The very stereotypical hotel on your corner is downstairs there'll be a bar, there'll be a gaming lounge attached to it, and then you go up some probably creaky old stairs, and there'll be about 5 or 6, bedrooms with legitimate accommodation. Hence where the hotel comes from.
I mean, a lot of these places would be a little bit dodgy with the rules. You needed a place to sleep for the night. They might have had one single small bed in a room upstairs, hidden in the corner, going, yeah, if someone passes out the bar, we got a bed for them upstairs. And it was kind of interesting because you'd have food and drink and they'd be separated, but it wouldn't be separated into how rich or poor you were. It would just be separated into drinks and eating, food and drink. So that means everyone was just mingling with each other from all different nationalities and all different how rich or how poor they were, based on just where they wanted to sit. So there was no kind of separation in that way. But the drinks were absolutely horrible. Back then, our beer was not good, not like we've got today. They actually used to be called swipes, because you had to swipe it down so quickly. Swipe it down in one gulp. Yeah, they were often flavored with tobacco to just add a little bit of flavor in it. So back then, our beer culture wasn't great. But I was looking it up recently. We don't drink a lot of beer these days. We actually, well, at least we don't drink a lot of independent beer that's made in Australia. Do you guys know what's actually our most drunk beverage in Australia?
I'm going to go cast wine.
It is wine. I don't know if it's cast wine. But yeah, by far, we drink more wine than any alcoholic beverage here in Melbourne. Only 3% of all our beer consumed in Australia is independent brewers, which is a little bit disappointing.
It's really interesting,
3%. Yeah. I mean, that's still 59 million litres a year, which doesn't sound so small when you put it in that number, but that's only 3%, which means we drink a lot of beer.
Yes.
And beer consumption is actually at its lowest point in the last 65 years. And I'm trying to think, why on earth would beer consumption be so low? Are we just so cultured now that we're having martinis and fancy cocktails and we're just not drinking beer anymore? Why is this a thing?
I mean, speaking with Sydney, and I'd like to get Jake's view, a lot of the small bars definitely specialise in alcohols outside beer. A lot of cocktail-based menus, a lot of whiskies, a lot of rums, a lot of tequilas. So perhaps the whole, I guess, the influx of small bars since the, amendment changed in 27 has led to a change in what we're actually drinking. I mean, is there particular cocktail places that you actually frequently visit, Jake, and just sort of taking you from ever thinking about consuming those hops and barley again?
I personally am a cocktail guy. Like, I will very happily drink a beer, but like maybe one beer and then move on to the cocktails. That could be a comment on socioeconomic kind of positions. Potentially, like, we're quite obviously an affluent country. We have access to more of these kind of more expensive drinks, in the city at least. But yeah, there are many cocktail bars that I frequent.
Well, I'm sure you frequent a lot of different cocktail lounges, cocktail bars. Are there any places in Sydney, because there's two that I know of in Melbourne that are very special, that only serve Australian alcohol, Australian beer, Australian cider, Australian liqueur? Do you know of any places like that?
I'm not sure of any places per se that only serve alcohol from Australia, but I do know one place near Circuit here called Bulletin Place, who specifically source all the ingredients for their cocktails from local markets and whatever is currently seasonal.
Right.
So while they may also sell other alcohols internationally, their mainstay and what they're famous for, their weekly changing cocktail menu, is entirely based on locally sourced and seasonal ingredients.
Bulletin Place is amazing. They do 5 new cocktails every day. Like, their menu is just a roll of butcher paper. So they write it up, they roll it down, they, tear it off.
That's got to be so much effort for the staff.
Yeah.
So much effort, but they're so knowledgeable. I've had some very great conversations at Bulletin Place. And yeah, it's literally right at Circular Quay.
Yeah.
Such a great place.
The two places in Melbourne that I know of are Bad Frankie's and New Gold Mountain. Namgam Sun, because we were the second golden mountain. The first gold rush was in California. and then the second gold rush, big one at that time. They practically happened overlapping each other and happened in Melbourne. So we became New Gold Mountain. And despite it having a Chinese kind of themed name, the whole place is only Australian beers, ciders, liqueurs, spirits.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that you can't get in there. No tequila. Unfortunately, tequila cannot be made in Australia, or else it's not called tequila.
Only allowed to be made in Mexico, is that correct?
Yeah, and things like champagne, which can only be made in the region of Champagne in France.
Yeah.
Things like Scotch can't be made in Australia. So there's a couple of things that they don't have, but supporting Australian beer and cider and spirits, it's absolutely amazing. And I know I was talking a lot of doom and gloom about our beer culture is dying here in Melbourne, but it's kind of the opposite. I think we're just drinking a lot more in general. We've gone from more brewers in the past decade. So from about 2015 to about 2005 to 2015, we've gone from approximately having 30 small brewers that exist in Australia to now 379.
Wow.
So we have increased dramatically in the last 10 years, and 116 of them are in Melbourne, in the Victorian area. So very proud of our local brewers. It's actually, if you're in the centre of the city, filled with business people, rich people that want fancy cocktails, the further north you go, the younger the population gets, the vibe becomes entirely different, and the amount of alcohol that you can buy from small independent brewers actually goes up. Is that a similar thing in Sydney, where in the centre of the city you won't find as many as outer suburbs?
Well, I definitely know there's a couple of independent brewers in Newtown area. So that's where you can get some independent beers. One that I do quite enjoy is called Young Henry's, which has come on the scene the last sort of 3 to 4 years. It's not so much really, it's the more west you go, the more east you go, that kind of you get more independence.
So you'll suggest people to go to different areas based on what their poison of choice is.
Yes. As a guide, Jake, where are you sending people often?
Yeah, many places. On the subject of the north, so I'm from the northern suburbs of Sydney. I used to work at a bar in Crow's Nest. Crow's Nest is a nice little suburb that has some beautiful small bars. I used to work at one called the Foxtrot, which had like a nice fireplace, these nice infusions and syrups. There's also the Crow Bar there, the Stone Crow, the Haybury as well. Good restaurants too. I do usually, like to send people just in the CBD, because people don't like to travel out often in a new city when they travel here. And just because there are so many amazing places in the city doing fun things. Surrey Hills, though, of course. Surrey Hills, like all along Crown Street and up Fourveau Street, has some of my favorite cocktail bars in Sydney, like Tokyo Bird. Tokyo Bird is like one of those really intimate, quiet little bars. It also has one of Australia's largest Japanese whiskey collections.
Right.
So if you're into Japanese whiskey, it's a great place to go. They project this beautiful anime on on the walls, and the bartenders know everything about Japanese whiskey. Or I will send them to Newtown, definitely. You've got like Mary's and Earl's Duke joint.
Well, one final question before we wrap up today's podcast. We've been obviously socially distancing, we've been socially isolated, a lot of us being kept up inside for many weeks, many more weeks to come. If one is visiting Melbourne or visiting Sydney as a single person and would like to go somewhere that's a little bit more intimate, potentially a place to find a fellow single person to mingle, as per se, something more intimate atmosphere. When it all reopens, where are you first going?
Ooh, tough question. I'm very excited to go to a whole bunch of places, and I hope they're doing all right during the lockdown, and they'll be fine when everything opens back up again. the type of place that I like to go to if I'm by myself are generally places where I can talk to the bartender, where I can chat to the person who's working there. You're looking at places like Bar Americano. The smallest bar in Melbourne can only fit 10 people in their bar, according to their liquor license. Places like Little Lon, the only gin distillery or the only distillery in the center of the city, which can fit maybe 15, 20 people. Really great place to talk to the bartender, to talk to the staff there. Places like New Gold Mountain, which I mentioned, or Bad Frankie for Australian alcohol and spirits. It's the best place to just sit and chat to the bartenders for as long as, because they are obsessed with alcohol. They will not shut up about all the local amazing things that they know about in the area. If you're looking for places to mingle, you're probably going to want slightly larger places that you can dance a little bit in. Places like Millhouse, White Hart Bar in the center of the city, Croft Institute, places where it's a little bit more free form to walk around and you can kind of chat to people rather than a fully seated venue. If you're at a fully seated venue, everyone will kind of be at tables with their friends, with their family, and they won't be as willing to chat with everyone. So try and find a place with a little bit of a dance floor if you want to mingle, or with a small and intimate place if you want to talk to the bartender and learn about Melbourne's amazing alcohol we have on offer.
For me personally, there are so many small bars that I cannot wait to go to. I also really like that a lot of them are doing like homemade cocktails, like not homemade cocktails, but like delivery cocktails, things like that. I know bar PS40 have released a sofa cocktail range over this time. They're in little bottles. But one in terms of like taking a date to, I'd probably go to Papa Getty's because you just would never run out of things to talk about, I think. So Papa Getty's is in the CBD. It's like an old converted garage, but it's like voodoo, New Orleans inspired decor. Their menu are all like puns on kind of memes. But also like they hand make their own tonic water and spirits. They use locally sourced like honey, and they often use like Australian native ingredients too, like wattle seed and lemon myrtle, which I love. I actually had a cocktail there that had tequila and Milo in it as well, and it was delicious. Yeah, so they're doing some really fun things at Papa Getty's. It's one of those places that lots of conversation starters.
I wanted to ask what's your poison of choice?
Ooh, how long do we have?
Do you have a favorite? If you to go with
like I will honestly drink anything.
True Australian, excellent.
Yeah, well, like just like I will enjoy any kind of flavor. I guess my first love in terms of cocktails and spirits was gin, and all of the amazing cocktails you can make there. Most recently, though, started to drink more whiskey, which has been a fun adventure, and mezcal.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, gin is definitely my favorite. I'm very lucky that gin is my favorite because at the moment in Australia specifically, well, in all over the world, I was recently in Europe and talking to a lot of different bartenders, and they were all telling me that gin is the coolest thing to make at the moment. A lot of the gin distilleries in Melbourne actually want to be whiskey distilleries, but whiskey takes forever to make. It's just one of those things you gotta let it brew for many a year, and so as an interim, while they're making whiskey, they're distilling and selling gin. So all of these gin places have popped up in Melbourne. We've won awards for our gin in Australia that we make, not just in the Melbourne area, but Adelaide and New South Wales as well. And as a result, it cannot be a better time to be a gin lover. It is everywhere in Melbourne.
I would have to say, I have recently found a love for soju. I have a lot of Asian friends. I live in very much a Korean neighborhood, and just my local places have just converted me to just the fact that it's a great mixture between easy to drink, higher alcoholic content, nice flavors, goes down well. I like to think of whichever drink I'm ending the night with, that's my favorite one. And I have to say, I end most nights with soju.
Well, I know exactly where to take both of you when you come to Melbourne now. So excellent.
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
I'll book my flight.
Thank you very much, Lenny. Thank you very much, Jake, for all your insights today on the history and current scene of the small bars in Sydney and Melbourne.
Thank you so much for having me.
People visiting each town and city will have a couple of extra ideas. And all the best for when things reopen, hopefully in stage 2 and stage 3.
Woo.
And we'll see you next week.
Cheers to that.
All right, thank you very much.
Alrighty.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.